How to write the Netapp descriptor. This video tries to illustrate from a high-level point of view how a Netapp descriptor can be written to introduce this kind of design to those who do not have previous experience with the 5G ecosystem or who are not familiar with the NFV paradigm. To do so, it briefly presents the lifecycle of a Netapp and it provides an example of the design, using a real Netapp that will be used in the 5GAS project. Finally, it shows how the Netapp can be onboarded to the platform to be deployed and tested. In first place, what is a descriptor? 5G Netapps are defined as a set of services that provide functionality to verticals. They can be described from a high-level perspective as the way to deliver an application or service to the 5G ecosystem. In this way, the descriptor does not define the behavior or the functioning of the service, but how it can be integrated in the 5G infrastructure and managed by it. To do so, it specifies three different components of the Netapp. The first one is the network functions and network services. The network functions define what are the components of the application and how are they hosted in different VNFs. And then the network services define the relationship among them. Then we move on to the network slice that define the network characteristic that will host the service, the network services and the network functions. And finally, we have the test that define what has to be tested and how it can be certified in order to validate the Netapp to be deployed in the 5G infrastructure. Regarding the code base, the application or service itself, it will be embedded in the VNFs, in the VNF defined by the network functions. And why do we need a descriptor? By describing a Netapp in this way, the 5G infrastructure will be able to orchestrate and book the computing and network resources to deploy optimally the 5G application or service. In 5GAS, we have developed a simple Netapp lifecycle that is composed of 4 phases. The first one is the design. Then we have the development, in which the descriptors are written. Then we have the testing phase, and in the validation phase, the results of the tests are gathered and checked if the Netapp can be validated and certified to be deployed in the 5G infrastructure. Now, we will show this with a Netapp example, that it is the virtual onboard unit, a real Netapp that will be deployed and tested in the 5GAS infrastructure. The objective of this Netapp is to virtualize the vehicle physical obus into virtual obus. By doing so, we can create a MEC layer to offload computational tasks from the physical obu to the virtual obu and to serve earlier data access requests. By doing so, this Netapp provides benefits such as we gain robustness against potential disconnection from the network, we save radio resources, and we can improve the data processing performance. Here we have the general architecture of the application. On the left, we have the application itself running in the physical obu. In the middle, we have the MEC layer in which the virtual obus are hosted. And on the right, we have the virtual data aggregator that serves as a point of entry for the application requesting data. Finally, we have the virtual obu manager that will instantiate the virtual obus on demand. Now that we know the general architecture of our application, we can start to design the Netapp in order to describe it with the different descriptors. In first place, we have to know how many network functions are included in our Netapp. In this case, we have clearly 3 different ones. The first one is the virtual obu, that is our first network function. Then we have the obu manager, and the third one is the data aggregator. So we have 3 different network functions. Then we move on to the defining of the network service. Here we have 2 options. The first one is to define a single network service that covers the end-to-end communication. but we have an improvement that it is the defining of 3 different network services that provide more granularity and a little more control over these network services. One for the run, one from the NEC, and one from the core network. Now we can move on to the network slice defining the second part of the descriptor. In this case, we have to define the network constraint for the application or service. Here we have several examples of what can be included in this description. The area of service, which is where the Netapp will be deployed, the isolation level required for the network resources with regard to the virtualization and the sharing of physical resources, the slice quality of service according to the 5GPP, and then several constraints or requirements that depend on the application itself. For example, here we have 4 that are the packet loss ratio supported by the service, the device velocity specifically for vehicular services, the downlink and uplink throughput, and the latency requirements, for example, for latency constrained applications. Now that we have defined our network slice, we can move on to the testing phase or the testing descriptor. The objective is to ensure a valid functioning of the application or service, and if successful, the Netapp will be certified. So we have 2 different ways of testing the Netapp. The first one is from the perspective of the infrastructure metrics that are the latency, the throughput, the correct deployment, the correct connectivity among the components. And then we have the second perspective, that is the operation testing, that covers the behavior of the Netapp and the correct functioning of the application or service that is hosted in this Netapp. So for the descriptor itself, we will have 2 types: the descriptor of the infrastructure test that will be provided by the testbeds, and then the operational test that will be custom test developed by the experimenters. Now that we have the descriptor with its 3 components, we can move on to the onboarding of the Netapp to the 5GAS platform. As I have mentioned, we have the descriptor ready to be onboarded. We select the testbed in which we want to deploy our Netapp, and the onboarding procedure starts with the 5GAS portal in an interactive way. Once the onboarding procedure is finished, we move on to deployment and the testing automatically of the Netapp. If successful, and the Netapp is certified, and it can be published in the 5GAS marketplace.